Hello, my friends. This is Deepak Chopra, and we are back to our conversations with amazing people, cutting edge conversations on the cutting edge of science, spirituality, and everything that's relevant for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. And my very special guest today is Nicole Casanova, and she's going to tell you all about how to create heaven on earth, I think, something like that. Before she does, Nicole, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very happy to be here. Root to Heaven is happy to be here.
That's great. So, before we get to your organization, what you're up to, your fundraiser, and all of that, I think it's important. We're going to reach a few million people here by the time this interview gets on social media. There'll be a lot of people watching this, and they mostly don't know who you are. They mostly are getting to know who I am. So it's good if we start a little bit in the beginning. Tell us about your childhood, where you grew up, where you went to school, your family, your parents, and then we get to what you're up to these days.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is a good place to start. I'm not sure that I completely know myself yet, but I'm definitely working on it. It's a lifelong journey.
I'm still trying to decide what I'll do when I grow up. So no.
I think you're doing pretty good.
Okay.
So I am born in Puerto Rico. This is where all of my family comes from for generations. And my family left Puerto Rico in the early 80s or mid 80s, just looking for better opportunities. There were a lot of dangerous things, a lot of poverty, a lot of crime. And in the place where we lived, in the climate that we lived, it wasn't particularly safe. And my parents decided to go to Florida and to find a better job and to relocate us. And it was a huge sacrifice to be away from our family and the Puerto Rican culture and the Boriken culture, I should say. We're very close. Our cousins are like our brothers and
How old
sisters.
were you
I was
when you came
4.5.
Okay.
Yeah, and we came to Florida on the New Year's Eve, I think. And that was our first day that we settled into this house. And it was very beautiful because at the time we didn't have a lot of money, and we had rented this house and we all slept in the living room. And the first day that we were there on New Year's Eve, it snowed in Florida. And this is very unusual. But for us coming from Puerto Rico, it was like the most magical thing you could expect. But I grew up in a really beautiful family, and a family that's deeply devoted and in service to their community always. My parents are Catholic. I grew up in the Catholic tradition. It helped me so much to learn how to pray. And Root to Heaven, the organization that I founded, is a very, very big prayer for the waters of the earth. And it manifests through reforestation and relationship and all kinds of things that we'll get into in a little while. But I grew up mostly in Florida. I went to Puerto Rico a lot to be with my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my family. And at the same time that we migrated to Florida, there were a grouping of other Puerto Rican families, a lot of immigrants from Mexico and Guatemala. And so we were able to grow up in this very amazing, what would you call it? Like a microclimate of our cultures combined. And it was very special. I didn't really get too much exposure to like more American mainstream culture until middle school. And I was always really grateful because my family gave me a lot of space and time to be outside. And I think this is a really big part of the work that I'm doing now, is making sure that other children have time to be outside, because there's so many good things that come from that, and give me an opportunity to connect to nature, to meditate, to listen, to be still, to play, to create, to dream. And my best friends were the trees and the elements and all kinds of little creatures that I could find on the ground. But
Which city in Florida?
in Fort Myers,
Okay.
yeah. And I went to Cypress Lake Middle School and high school. And I never really fully activated, I think, until after high school, where I would spend some time by myself in nature in the waterways there. Florida is an incredible ecology there, the swamps, the rivers, they're really beautiful, the oceans. And it kind of awoke something in me. And I knew at that time, and I had known before I needed to move to New York City, but I knew at that time that I needed to leave Florida to kind of like follow where my intuition was taking me. And I ended up going to Parsons for like a fashion intensive one summer. And then I was in France for a couple of years. And I actually returned to my ancestral land in Corsica just by chance, because I had no idea outwardly, consciously, that that's where my family was from. That's where my last name is from. And I found out after returning to the US, and that was a very special time. And I returned to New York to study at the new school, and I focused on environmental economics, food justice and sovereignty, and psychology, and a lot of art. I was deeply immersed in learning, and parallel to the new school studies, I was working and studying with Alan Finger and Sarah Platt Finger of Ishta. So it was just a couple blocks away from me. So I would often hop into morning classes.
Finger's next door to me, but now she's moved to Florida. You know that, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, we
And
still.
I are writing a book together.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, she's
Big-
incredible.
Yes, she is.
Mhm.
Keep going.
So I studied. I finished my studies. I began to work with a few peers in an organization called Alas de Rio, and it was like the wings of Rio. So it was kind of piggybacking off of all of the agreements and accords that were made at the Rio summit, the climate summit. And it was 20 years later, and the children had come into the children of the adults that went to make the agreements and accord had come into their own voice. So we were gathering together using technology and using platforms, social media, information sharing platforms as civil society in the United Nations to bring our voice into the conversation that we're having, that we're being had, I should say. And that was amazing. And at the same time, I had a lot of debt from student loans and I needed a real job, and that was volunteer work and all of the training that I'd had through yoga and through the Ishta lineage also kind of made me realize that there's work to be done on the individual level, one-on-one. And I began to focus more on that work. And I went into about a decade of working one-on-one with people through all of the knowledge I'd learned in yoga and Ayurveda, and also through like different modalities, energy healing modalities, meditation, breath work, sound. And then I found a really amazing teacher, and I'm definitely deeply devoted to and a student of the initiatic traditions and
Of the what tradition?
the initiatic traditions and the sacred traditions. And my teacher has just really helped me to like focus. And I think a good teacher will help you to understand what your gifts are. And so I've been deeply blessed to study with a lot of incredible and very, very special wisdom keepers and elders from the indigenous traditions of humanity, and to be in a place where I can gather what I need in order to share what will help. And Root to Heaven is very much born from that. I know I didn't say this earlier, but my name is Nicole Adriana Casanova, and it's very nice to meet you all. Thank you for letting me share about that.
Okay, now let's get to Roots to Heaven. When did you start that, and tell us about it?
Okay, so Root to Heaven was a vision that I received, a prayer that I received, and it came to me about 3 or 4 years ago, and I just kind of sat with it to understand it and to listen to it more and to be patient with it. And I launched the organization with a couple of our community members. I'm part of a really beautiful community in the Catskills and actually globally as well. We're all students of a shared teacher. And
Who's the teacher?
Maestro
Just
Manuel Rufino.
say that again.
Maestro Manuel Rufino.
Okay, and he's
I
in the
believe
US?
he is in the US. I believe you've met him before. We
Okay,
came, yeah, I believe at a Heart and Mind festival, maybe.
okay.
So where was I?
Yeah, you
So
community in the
November,
Yeah. What year did you start the organization?
we had our first launch in November of 2020. And that was kind of like our introduction into the world. And last year, we were able to raise enough funds and also with many people to plant around 16,000 trees in 2 continents and plant a lot more seeds. So we have a lot more trees for this year to share. And it was a really beautiful process. We partnered with the Heart and Mind Festival, with Flowering Sun Ecology Center, which is part of one of the really big initiatives in our community, is to be sustainable, to grow our own food, to take really, really good care of the land, to give back more than we take. So we practiced permaculture and through Flowering Sun Ecology Center, and Root to Heaven partners with Flowering Sun Ecology Center as a nursery. So all of our trees are coming out of Flowering Sun Ecology Center, and we practice just the relationship with the earth, and the entire community is involved. It's very, very amazing. Not just what it's brought to us in terms of resources, food, but in terms of the really beautiful, rich and dynamic relationships that it's helped each of us as individuals who go to work on the farm unlock with regards to the earth, but also with each other, because a farm is a huge responsibility and it takes a lot of work. And our farm in the peak season is feeding 40 or 50 people.
And where is
So
the farm?
this is in the Catskills.
How big is it?
It's a little less than an acre.
And how big is the community?
About the community in upstate is about 30 or 40 people. And in any given time, many people come to visit and stay. And yeah.
And the organization, there's a membership. How is the organization structured?
It's not so much that it's a membership. It's just people that are interested in practicing yoga and in good nutrition and living cleanly and meditation, mindfulness, and it's just, we all found our way. Our teacher, Maestro Manuel Rufino, had founded the Golden Drum Cultural Center in Brooklyn. And I think many of us found the community through our participation, our ongoing participation over many years through that center.
How big is the community distributed? You know, as a distributed community, how many people, how many of you are there?
I believe that the totality of the community around the world is probably several hundred people, at least. There's different places that we live, obviously, but we're all studying under the same lineage and the same teacher.
And this planting of trees is across the world? You said 2 continents, something like that.
Yeah, last year we had an amazing opportunity to work with the Mamos and the Zagas of the Sierra Nevadas de Santa Marta, Colombia, through relationships and bridges that were formed in the Golden Drum and Heart and Mind Festival. And we were able to give them several thousand trees. And these were very special trees because they were they were given to help them protect their land, not just for reforestation, but for cultural preservation. And I believe that in general, regenerative culture really includes cultural preservation as something fundamental in the ethos. And with the Mamos and the Zagas, their land, their sacred land, was being invaded by illegal mining industry, and all of their sacred groves where they go to pray or where they go to do offerings or healings were being dismantled by the illegal industries. And not just that, but their offerings that they make, which is very, very old, thousands of years old, they make very specific offerings. And if you're interested in knowing more about this, there's a movie called Aluna, and it talks about all of this.
Spell it.
Aluna.
Luna. Okay. And you have a website, Roots to Heaven?
I do. I have a website for Roots to Heaven. We're on social media as well. But
give us the contact information. What's the website called?
It's called rootstoheaven.com.
.com, not .org. And is this a nonprofit?
We are actually in our fundraiser. We are hoping to raise enough money to pay for lawyer fees so we can become a 501c3 nonprofit. We've been working with a fiscal sponsor, which has been amazing. It's called MISC, the Movement of the American Indian Solar Culture. And we realized that, well, that's been wonderful to kind of test that out for our first year. There's a lot of funding and grants that are available for individual independent entities that are registered 501c3s. And we have a lot of planting and education to offer and a lot of work to do. So we need to be able to take advantage of those opportunities as much as we can with that funding.
So not many people might know what permaculture is and what the big vision is. So give us a little more insight into what Roots to Heaven is doing, what the vision is, and what you'd like this conversation to achieve.
Thank you. So permaculture is the way that the earth was. It's the natural way that ecosystems function. It represents a lot of different plant species that are interrelated and interdependent, that serve to create health for the plants themselves, but also for the soil, for the water cycles, and for the entire ecosystem that is not just plant-based, but it's also wildlife-based. And these are interdependent relationships. And permaculture means that there are many plants planted in the same place. And this is deeply beneficial for the ecology of any location, because we need all of the different bacteria, we need all of the different microbes that live not only in the roots of the plant, but in the soil around the roots of the plant, to come up through the water, to come up through the flowers, through the fruits, through the food that we eat. And we need this because it helps our health. When we create monoculture, for example, as we've done here in the US with corn is the biggest crop that's grown in the US, and most of it is used for feed because it's not edible to human beings. We strip the land. We strip the land of so many vital nutrients. And we turn soil, which is a living matter, a living organism, into dirt. And that dirt turns into dust, and it creates deserts where there should be, as Deepak was saying, heaven on earth, places of water, places of life, places that are healthy, places that once they are at a certain level of health, they become self-sustaining and self-regenerating and renewing. And then they, in turn, begin to offer a lot of nutrients, food, flowers, medicines, whatever that we need, herbs, whatever that we need for people and for wildlife. So permaculture farming, for example, is the study of looking at what crops grow really well together. And not just for a few yields, but you have to think like longer than 2 or 3 years at a time. You have to think 10 years at a time. Like, how do these ecosystems become really strong and really resilient? And how do they become so rich that they start to flourish on their own? And we look at the different crops that grow well together, but also how they grow well together. And it might be that certain crops will grow well together for a few years, and then some need to be pulled out for a couple of years or a couple of seasons, and then others replaced, and then they can be put back in. So it's a study of how things grow really well together and create health for soil, which is really life.
If you had your way and Roots to Heaven became a global movement, which it should, then what would be the outcome for the world?
Oh, I I I see cities that are full of forests and clean water for everyone, and food for everyone. We live in a world that has plenty, and better relationships, because when we touch the ground, it slows down our breathing. It has an actual effect on our health. And the negative ions that are released from places like forests or oceans or waterfalls, they do impact our physiology, and they help us to slow down, and they help us to connect. And I think a lot of the things that we see in the world, a lot of the problems and the overconsumption comes from this sense of disconnection. And that disconnection can be to nature, it can be to our families, our communities, it can be to ourselves. There's no real meditation. And planting forests, planting tomatoes, this is a meditation. This asks us to stop and pay attention and put ourselves to the service of something bigger. And this disconnection, it is healed when we take the time to slow down and be of service to something bigger than ourselves. So I see Root to Heaven as not just the reforestation movement, but really an opportunity to celebrate cultures, celebrate relationships. A forest or a garden is an ecosystem, but so is a family, and so is a community, and so is a neighborhood. And each member of the community has a particular quality of being that they bring. So looking at how the ecosystem is going to strengthen the individual and how the individual is going to strengthen the ecosystem. And we have a kind of plant playbook that also promotes leadership training and identifying oneself and one's role in a project that can essentially help their family or their neighborhood or their community become food sovereign. There's a lot of disruptions in the food system right now. And I was just listening to the news a couple of days ago about the inflation prices on food. And it's not that difficult to grow a lot of food in a small space. So we've kind of put together all of this information to help people that are interested in cultivating this kind of relationship with the earth, with each other, working together to feed themselves, and if they can feed more people, great, and to reconnect with nature together. So I see this as a a movement that's really driven from the heart, that's really driven from a place where I see, and I think we all see, that we need some light and some fire put back into our relationship and to our will to connect and to show up and to grow.
What about climate change and this whole process? How does it affect climate change?
Well, one of the easiest and quickest solutions to climate change is to plant trees. Not just trees, but plant indigenous plants, please, because we can't just plant anything anywhere. We have to respect the biome of an ecosystem. And each ecosystem has its own biome, and we need to approach that with a lot of respect and responsibility so that we don't create invasive species that threaten the ecosystem that's in place. But plant indigenous plants and grasses. And if you have farm, look into planned rotating, or if you're a rancher, look into planned rotating of your cattle or your sheep or whatever it is that you have. If you're a farmer, please don't till the soil. We don't need to do that. We really don't. It will destroy the soil, and there's a lot of ways to rebuild it. So I think plant trees and plant them well, and plant them with a good mind and a good prayer, and with an understanding that they're being planted for the people 7 generations to come, so that they can be outside breathing clean air and drinking clean water and having relationships that are so important, even with themselves. And it is widely accepted that within 20 to 30 years, if we have mass reforestation, that carbon can be drawn down, and there will be carbon drawdown. And then we'll see like carbon cooling in the atmosphere after that. And the Family Tree Initiative, which is the initiative that we've invited you to share with us, Deepak, is the initiative where we look at more than just large-scale reforestation programs or projects, and we look beyond even the medium-scale community gardens, but we look into the hearts and homes of families. Because if every person in a family were to plant a tree for every member in their family on a large scale, this is exactly the impact and the sea change that we are asking for.
You mentioned the biome, so let me share with you, and you may already know all this, but for the audience, 99% of the genetic information in our body is actually the microbiome. It's in our gut, it's in our skin, it's in all the openings in our eyes, nose, genitalia, mouth. Only 1% or less of the genetic information in our body is human. So when you were conceived, you received 25,000 genes from your parents. But when you came into this world, and then as your mother or parents touched you and kissed you and licked you and breastfed you, etc., and the journey through the canal, the vaginal canal, the baby is covered by and inhales and swallows the vaginal secretions of its mother. And this is a second implantation of genes in the body. And these days, of course, when obstetricians do cesarean sections, for example, some of the smart ones, they take the secretions of the mother and they implant them in the baby's mouth so the baby can swallow them, the baby can inhale them, some through the nose, and they cover the body with that. Because right now, what's happened is 30% of this information has disappeared. Information in the body has disappeared in urban cities, in urban areas. And this has led to something called dysbiosis. And dysbiosis is now blamed on refined, processed, manufactured food, and also high sugar. And it leads to inflammation, and it's now connected apparently to most chronic disease, including cancer, heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune illness, premature aging, inflammation, depression. 80% of the serotonin in our body comes from the microbiome in the gut. So, what you're saying has huge implications for human health in general. And currently, this is the number one cause for premature aging, chronic diseases, inflammation, depression, mental illness as well. That's the human microbiome. But then if you go under the Amazon, for example, or any of these rainforests, and you go under the earth, not on the surface, 1 teaspoon of soil under the earth, you probably know all this, but I'm just sharing it with you for everybody else. 1 teaspoon of soil under the earth in a rainforest has more genetic biodiversity than the entire surface of the planet. 1 teaspoon, including the rainforest. So that is called the planetary biome, microbiome. We have the human microbiome. Of course, every animal has its own microbiome. But then there's planetary microbiome, which apparently, I'm told now, I'm talking to a lot of geneticists and experts in this area, they say that under the soil of uncontaminated rainforests, unfortunately, even the Himalayas are getting contaminated now.
Yeah.
But if you go underneath, you may have, or you do have, the genetic information of even extinct species. Theoretically, you could bring back Jurassic Park if you wanted to. And that genetic biodiversity is very important for the biosphere, because we have, the human body is a biosphere, but so is the planet, a biosphere. And they're inseparably one. After all, the trees are your lungs, and the earth is your body, and the rivers are your circulation, and the air is your breath. And everything that we are is an ecosystem. Everything is an ecosystem. There's no such thing as a thing. It's all ecosystem. So recently, I got a little bit involved with something that was called Resurrecting the Panther's Path in Florida. I don't know if you heard about that, but when ecologists repaired the ecosystem just for one species, the panther in Florida, all the other species started to come back. You know, it's not just the panther that was, there were a few hundred panthers, and now there are a few thousand, and they're growing, but all the other flora and fauna also got resurrected. Similarly, there's a project right now called the Bison's Path from Pennsylvania all the way to Michigan. And the same thing is happening. You restore the path of the bison, everything comes back. So what you're doing is very, very important on a very massive scale. If people could pick up this movement, even in little ways, as you said, it has huge implications, not only for the health of the planet, but for our own health and ultimately the survival of the planet. Do you know a place called Chosen in Florida? Chozen?
No, it's been many, many years since I've been to Florida,
Did you
actually.
move around? Do you have a place that you live in the United States?
I live in New York. I lived in the city for 16 years, and then in
So
April 20.
maybe we should connect you to some of these other projects like Rewilding Cities. There's a whole program coming up in the World Economic Forum in June or July, and all these people are going to be there. Maybe we can share this video with them. But I think this needs to reach a critical mass. So before we end, and before I thank you so much for joining me, just give a little information about how people can get in touch, how we can contribute to your cause, and then I'll connect you to a lot of other people in the whole ecosystem of humans that are trying to resurrect and help create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier world, because it's all connected as well. How can people get in touch with your organization? Or we'll put that information at the bottom of this, when we publish this, which will take a few weeks. Do you want to say anything else before we finish?
I would love to. You can get a hold of our organization through roottoheaven.com. You can follow us on Instagram. We're at Root to Heaven. On Facebook, we're Rooted to Heaven. And we would love to have as many amazing activists and people looking for inspiration and solutions and blueprints on how to get involved and how to create these systems in your own backyard. At our March 3rd event called Family Tree, we have amazing speakers, yourself included. And we'll have cool.
I'm on this video now, right? March 3. So you want to show this then?
Yes.
That's what you mean, myself included. Okay.
Yes.
Because March 3, I think I'm somewhere else.
I got it. And we have a really special kumu, an elder from Hawaii, who's one of the key guardians of Mauna Kea, underwater protector. And we have really beautiful youth leaders from Aguasasni, and also the Mamos and the Sagas from the Sierras, which we plan to send more trees and supplies and resources to them this year as well, as they unfold their own regenerative culture within their traditional ways of worldviews and ways and knowledge. And it would be great to have people there. You can donate and register.
This is in New York? This is in New York?
This is online. It's online.
Online on March 3.
On March 3rd from 6 to 10 p.m. Eastern. And I actually, Deepak, if it's okay, I would love to ask you a question, because something that you mentioned inspired a deeper meditation that I've been having about the keystone species and soil and the biome. And what you mentioned about reintroducing the species, this is something that we have as a community really seen happen naturally as we take care of the earth and as we take care of the land, the plants, the soil. We've seen a lot of species come back into the ecosystem and they do their own form of tending. It's been very beautiful. This is why rewilding is one of the branches of Root to Heaven. We really believe this is important. And at the same time, there's a relationship between these keystone species and the land, the soil, the shape of waterways. Some are architects, some are way showers, some predators are really important, some prey are really important. The food is important to all of them. One of the things that I have personally witnessed with regard to soil, which, as you mentioned, 90% of the world's biodiversity is in the Amazon soil, is that this soil has been stewarded and taken care of by the indigenous for millennia. To them, soil is not dirt. It's a living being. It's a living spirit. And I think this is a key for all of us. When we start our gardens in our backyard, or when we plant our fruits or vegetables or trees for our family members, to remember that we're living with spirits, that we're planting with the spirit of something that's alive, that's also in us. So I want to share that because I think this is...
Maybe we can do something in New York City itself. The rewilding cities is becoming a movement as well right now. So we'll connect on that. And I'll connect you to other people who are engaged in similar work. And then we'll spread this information everywhere. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and for the opportunity.